over the last 50 years, there have been monumental changes in the agricultural sector, whereas the pre-independence period was a period in which we basically had the agricultural sector was basically dominated by large plantations, what we used to call estates, that essentially cultivated a lot of what we call traditional crops, cocoa, nutmeg, bananas. And one of the major changes we saw in the agricultural sector during the post-independence period has been where they dismantled some of the large estates and made lands available to persons who traditionally were workers on the estate. They used to coin a term lands for the landless under the Sir Eric Matugeri initiative. So what we had essentially was, we saw, like in 1978, the banana industry had its first incidence of Moko disease. And I could tell you for sure that disease was very, very significant in terms of its negative impact on the banana subsector. So the mere fact that Grenada had the Moko disease, it really, really impacted negatively on the banana subsector. For example, if we look at the banana exports in 1968, Grenada exported about 53.4 million pounds of bananas. That was the highest ever recorded in Grenada. So when we saw, and then you look at in the 70s, we just saw the banana just keep decreasing. Well, clearly, two main factors would have contributed to that. One was the incidence of the Moko disease. And secondly, we think the dismantling of the estate systems. But of course, the access to land is just one factor important for agriculture development. You need access to loans, you need training, you need markets. So there's a plethora of factors that need to be put in place to ensure that agriculture enterprise succeed. And that has been one of the major negative in terms of the land reform project. So if you look at some notable changes occurring in the agriculture sector over the last few years has been the proliferation of small farm holding. Secondly, reduction in the production of traditional crops such as banana, cocoa, nutmegs. And one of the things that happened over the last 50 years is we saw a serious reduction of the contribution of the agricultural sector to the gross domestic product. Because clearly in the 1930s, 40s, 50s thereabouts, the contribution of the agricultural sector to GDP was 80%, for example, 80%. But clearly, the economy was not as diversified as it is today, for example. Here we have, the much more diversification. We have a lot of the service sector, tourism, education, all these things. Even today, an institution as SGU contributing in excess of 20% to GDP. More than 20%. So you could see over time, people become educated, there's more opportunities, so that there was less access to farm labor. As we see now, you go around Grenada and people will tell you they have problem accessing good labor. People have more option, or people are more educated. So clearly, over the last 50 years, we've virtually had seen the dissemination of the banana subsector. And that has been significantly impactful, negatively so, especially in the rural communities. Because banana, you could produce and sell banana right through the year. There was a steady flow of income, in contrast to other crops where it's seasonal in a way. And so one of the things that they found very difficult to do, especially at the Windward Island level, because Grenada has always had a very diversified agricultural system. Remember, we had banana, we had cocoa, nutmeg, then you have exotic spices. And Grenada had, again, a very thriving exotic fruit industry. So, we traditionally exported mangoes, golden apple of all time. And over the last 50 years, that is one thing we observed too. Our original trade with Trinidad had decreased over time. And there's a lot of factors contributing to that too, and especially pest and disease, the incidence of pest and diseases, and all these things. And so but the banana industry decrease has been monumental. And what we have seen over the last 50 years was a general quest to even diversify even more the agricultural sector. And especially, for example, if you look at the cocoa subsector, we have seen a quest to develop a lot of factories producing high quality chocolate. I remember traveling once to an European country and they were amazed at the quality, of the chocolate produced. So that is really a positive development because for years people believe we should be doing much more in terms of agro-processing. And talking about agro-processing, that's one thing that has been developed, I think, in a significant way over the last 50 years. We have a proliferation of small agro-processors producing a vast array of products of all types. In fact, we in 2008 the Ministry of Agriculture was involved in a special project in tandem with the FAO. And I remember vividly the contact person responsible for that project in the FAO was a guy called Dr. Jerome Thomas, and he always regarded Grenada as the capital of agro-processing in Windward Islands because the amount of persons we had involved. But I think what has to be done in that to even spur more development is to provide much more support through training and maybe opportunities. It has been recommended some time ago by one of the consultants who was working on I think the SFA 2001 project, that some central facilities must be built, maybe in St. Andrew where we have a lot of production of raw material, so that agro-processors could have access to better equipment and to enhance. It's something that maybe could be really, really explored to provide good support in terms of agro-processing. In terms of the nutmeg industry, nutmeg industry has been regarded as the black gold. Over the last 50 years, we have seen ups and downs with the nutmeg industry, and that's one of the things one must realize in regard to fresh agricultural commodities. You have a lot of variation in terms of market prices and condition and so forth. For example, a few years ago, a ton of nutmegs were fetching very, very, very high price. Then it dropped, then it rise again. If you look at 1989, the GCNA paid out $21 million, not the year, but the financial year. And it only shows you how impactful the Nutmeg Association has been in terms of the impact on the economy. And going back, and it has always been suggested that diversification within the nutmeg industry is important. And we had a gentleman like Dennis Noel who had invested and started in nutmeg, which was a really, really good initiative. In fact, everywhere you go in the Caribbean, people are asking about nutmeg because it had very, very good impact in terms of its impact on arthritis and other such thing, But I sincerely hope that, as time elapses, they need to have much more initiative like this, where you could have agro-processing products you could export rather than just exporting the raw material. Around the middle of the 1980s, the ministry implemented a project called Agricultural Rehabilitation and Crop Diversification Project. That project was meant again to even diversify the agricultural sector even more. It was felt that there was an over-reliance on the export of traditional nutmeg banana cocoa. It was felt that we had to look for something more. So essentially what happened then was the implementation of initiatives to look at cut flowers. For example, Grenada, as you know, has good climatic conditions and ecological conditions to grow in a very fantastic way. Cut flowers, and there is good export market for cut flowers, and even at the local market. And then you had start putting in place system to develop our exotic fruit subsector, as well as vegetables and so forth. One of the tangible I could say priority that was given, especially over the last 15, 20 years in Grenada, was to look to see how Grenada could put much more emphasis in regard to its food and nutrition security. What essentially happened as early as maybe 2000, 2001, the Ministry of Agriculture started making budgetary allocation to provide support to what we call a food security initiative. It was meant to support, for example, especially the marginalized in society. So that was in a way somewhat impactful because you look at people who were given, for example, maybe some chicken, to raise a small ruminant or two, and given vegetables, some fruit trees. And in fact, some people became so successful that they wanted to transition into full-time farming. And so that was really a visionary approach in the ministry. But in 2008, when we had the food crisis, because they had a serious economic downturn globally, food prices escalated because of high prices of energy and so forth. And so coming out of the crisis, Grenada believed, yes, as I indicated, Grenada started in a way some budgetary allocation in the Ministry of Agriculture to support people in terms of food security. They felt that you need to put policies and things in place, have policies and so forth. So in 2015, Grenada developed the Food and Nutrition Security Policy, which was significant, which meant that you're looking at all the different pillars of food security, access to food, food availability, food stability, and all this, food utilization, the 4 pillars. And again, if you listen to clearly, every time somebody from the ministry at the highest level speak, they would always speak about food and nutrition security and everything else. That's an area that is critical. But what happened with the industry, you'd see from time and time, sometimes priority change in time. For example, in the colonial period, sugarcane was very important, but in time it became less important because you got a lot of competition from sugars, from beet. And then you see now, at one time, the banana industry, people believe it was very important, but you see, it continued to be important because Grenada consumed a lot of banana, but not as, in where banana was exported in drove. That didn't happen now. So in all different periods, people looking at how it is we could do things differently because the global situation has changed. Even if Grenada wanted to continue growing banana at the same level that we saw in 1968 when we produced almost 54 million tons of banana, export that is, we couldn't do it now because we do not have the market access in a way. Because now you have to compete with the big producers in Latin America that were much more efficient and everything than yourself. So you always have to find niche market. And that's why, again, one of the things we saw emerging in the last couple of years has been soursop, the soursop story. Soursop is now one of Grenada, we consider it to be Grenada's green gold, whereas we referred to nutmeg as the black gold, now soursop as the green gold. So, because Grenada has a very unique opportunity. Grenada is the only country in the world that could export fresh soursop to the United States. And I tell you, there's initiative now through the FAO and the ministry to develop the value chain. And Grenada is benefiting in a way, but I still feel a lot more has to be done in terms of intensifying the production because we are just touching the surface because we could export maybe 100 times more than we're exporting. But again, you had to put system in place, the production, the propagation, the support services. And that is being addressed at the moment, but we have to speed along because we do not want a few years from now, other countries come and, displace Grenada. One of the things that the food and nutrition security has taught us is that we have to look at areas where we could put much more effort. For example, import of poultry and poultry products in Grenada now is bothering much about 40 million per year. How it is, and we've seen over the years a lot of attempt has been made to see how we could produce much more of that poultry. So you avoid foreign exchange leakage while at the same time you're providing support to people involved in poultry to make them much more self-sufficient, much more efficient. And I'm telling you for sure that over the last few years we have seen a number of persons coming into poultry production. Example, you look at even small ruminants is one area I think the ministry is trying to provide support to, and which is good because we do not have the land space to be a big cattle producing country, but small ruminants done in a proper way with a good pedigree, and so forth. You could look at producing for milk, for meat and everything else. And we have seen in the 1990s, the early 2000s, through support from the European Union, we got some support on a project called Special Framework of Mutual Agreement to the European Union, where a lot of money was provided for irrigation development. And farmers got pumps, drip lines, irrigation lines, and all the works. And over time, we see a lot of farmers now cannot do serious agriculture without irrigation. So irrigation has been one of the things that we saw develop over the period we are talking about the last 50 years, a lot of irrigation works and so forth. So essentially, agriculture is a very dynamic industry. If you look at since colonial time, how things have changed. the crops, the kind of crops to prioritize for production, and how in time, you've seen all these changes because we never used to talk about climate change 40 years ago, but today we're talking about it in a serious way. And now there is an effort now to see how do we use protective culture with the use of shade houses because of the kind of weather pattern we get in all this rain and thing, and you cannot grow vegetables in a very efficient manner. So protective culture. So if I have to give a verdict, what in terms of the agriculture development over the last 50 years, it's mixed. We always believe if you lay your aspirations very high, it's not a bad thing. If we reach midway, you would say, yes, well, I achieved something. I mean, I know a lot of people feel, we could achieve more than we have achieved. I think, yes, certainly we can. But it's not an easy industry because we are afflicted with so much adversities. So I think there's a lot of work to be done. If you want the agriculture to be sustainable, we would want to see much more young people get involved. And it's not just encouraging them. You have to put the proper enabling environment and ensure that they have access to land. I see there's a land bank project initiated in Grenada now. You have access to finance, access to training, access to market. All those things would be very, very important. And we have to be serious. We have to ensure that the ministry has the requisite cadre of technical people who could go out there and train and support and advise. Very, very important. The people involved in agro-processing, what support could be given to them, whether they have access to a facility where they could go and do the thing at the end of the day. Yes, that might be something that the ministry would have to look at seriously. Provide support for research and development. Is under research, we could find out solution, get good solution to all the problems that are afflicting us. And I think if we do all this and more, I think the agricultural industry would be able to make the kind of impact that everybody envisage that it can make.